a 75-year-old woman discovers she is pregnant and must choose between her life and that of the baby. With fragile health, she faces a decision that divides her family and forces her to reevaluate her existence. Olivia had always been the heart of her home. In that small, quiet village, everyone knew her as a woman, with a kind smile and calloused hands, marked by years of hard work and dedication. At 75, the townspeople saw her as a figure of wisdom and generosity, and her presence radiated warmth that made anyone feel at home. Her husband Michael, with whom she had shared decades of deep love, had passed away more than 20 years ago, and since then, Olivia had taken on the roles of mother and grandmother with unwavering commitment. On one of those autumn afternoons, when the sky enveloped the village in warm hues, Olivia sat in her favorite chair by the living room window. From there, she could see the garden she cherished, where she had spent many afternoons with Michael. That particular afternoon, while listening to the laughter of children playing in the street, she reflected on what it meant to have reached this stage of life. Her children, Lucia and Charles, now adults, maintained a close relationship with her. They visited often, seeking not only the comfort of her home, but also her advice and wise words. Lucia, the eldest, had always been a practical, detail-oriented, and protective woman. She often relied on her mother's words to make important decisions. Charles, the youngest, was more serene and devoted. His unwavering faith in God was something Olivia valued, as it reminded her of the peace and calm she had always shared with Michael. Her granddaughter Anna, an observant and curious teenager, spent long afternoons with Olivia, listening to her stories of youth and the days when her grandfather Michael filled the house with laughter. The connection between them was special, and Anna saw her grandmother not just as a family figure, but as a friend and guide she could trust without reservations. Despite her fragile body, Olivia had always been strong in spirit. Each morning, she rose early to tend to the small tasks around the house, even though her children urged her to take it easy. However, in recent weeks, she had begun to notice a fatigue that felt unusual. Sometimes she experienced dizziness, and the tiredness seemed to linger, regardless of how well she rested. Olivia, with her calm and practical nature, attributed these ailments to the aches of old age, preferring not to worry her children. She knew they already carried their own burdens and didn't want to be a burden to anyone. That evening, while having dinner alone and listening to the old records she used to play with Michael, she reflected on her life and the peace she had achieved. She had the important things, a united family and a granddaughter she loved deeply. Yet she felt that something within her was changing, as if a door was slowly opening to something she could not yet see. As she turned off the lamp to go to bed, Olivia took one last look at the frame holding Michael's photo, the man who had been her life partner and who, even after so many years, remained her emotional anchor. "How beautiful it has all been, Michael," she murmured softly before falling asleep, unaware that in the coming days her life would take a turn that would test all the strength she had always shown. Days passed, and that strange fatigue Olivia had felt did not seem to ease. Sometimes, while tidying up the kitchen or tending to the garden, she experienced sudden dizziness that forced her to sit down. At first, she tried to ignore it, convinced it was just a natural effect of aging. However, one morning, after nearly fainting while climbing the stairs, she decided it was time to face reality and visit the doctor. Upon entering the small village clinic, she was welcomed with the respect and kindness she always received. Everyone knew Olivia, and several young doctors had grown up under the influence of her stories and advice. After undergoing a series of routine examinations and ensuring that all details of her health were in order, Olivia was called into the office to receive the results. Dr. Brown, a kind woman with a serene face, entered with an expression Olivia could not decipher. She sat down across from her and, after a brief pause, explained that the tests had shown something unusual. Olivia leaned forward, attentive, as the doctor sought the right words. "Olivia, I know what I'm about to tell you will surprise you," the doctor began, speaking in a low and measured tone. "Your symptoms of fatigue and dizziness are not just due to age. The tests revealed that you are pregnant." The silence that followed hung like an invisible weight in the room. Olivia, perplexed, looked at the doctor, searching for any sign of a joke, any clarification that would deny what she had just heard. "What do you mean?" she finally managed to articulate, her voice trembling. The doctor explained that, although it was an extremely rare case, the tests indicated that the pregnancy was viable. Science could not explain in detail how it had happened, but there it was, present in the results. However, she warned her that the risks were high, both for her and for the baby. A pregnancy at her age entailed immense physical strain, and her health, although strong in spirit, was fragile and vulnerable. Olivia could barely hear the doctor's warnings. Her mind was overwhelmed by the very idea of being pregnant. It was something she had never considered possible at 75. Suddenly, like a torrent of images, she recalled the moments when she and Michael dreamed of a large family, the effort they had put into raising their children, and the love that had united them for decades. Without knowing how or why, she felt that this baby was an unexpected gift, a last opportunity to relive the memories of her youth and the love shared with her husband. Confused and scared, Olivia left the office and walked through the village streets. The air felt different, each step heavier than the last. Thoughts crowded her mind. How would she face this situation? What would her children think? Would she be risking her life for nothing? Yet alongside those questions, there was a small spark of emotion she could not comprehend, a kind of joy mixed with disbelief that made her heart race. When she arrived home, she sat in her armchair, taking deep breaths as her gaze drifted to the garden. Amid her doubts and fears, Olivia felt a strange and warm connection to the memory of Michael, as if, in some inexplicable way, he were there, accompanying her in this surreal moment. She knew her life would never be the same, and that the decision she made would affect all those she loved. But for now, she could only remain silent, allowing the reality of that unexpected news to slowly envelop her, like the last ray of sunlight falling on the garden. That night, Olivia could hardly sleep. Her mind swirled with thoughts that came and went, and the memory of Michael accompanied her in each one. Sitting by the window, with the dark mantle of night covering the village, she began to recall the life they had built together, the days filled with shared dreams and sacrifices, and how, since his departure, she had learned to live with the solitude he had left behind. She could still see the first day she met him, as if it had happened yesterday. It was at a village party, one of those celebrations where all the neighbors shared laughter and dances in the main square. Michael was a tall man, with a broad smile and an easy laugh, and he had a presence that captured everyone's attention. Olivia, who barely knew him then, felt captivated by his kindness and the warmth he radiated. That very night, while dancing under the twinkling lights, they shared dreams of a life together, unaware that those dreams would come true. She also remembered the early years of marriage, when they struggled to build a home of their own. Michael worked long hours and always came home with rough hands, filled with small cuts that he downplayed, but Olivia knew it was for their well-being and the children they dreamed of having. For them, life was full of sacrifices, and both were willing to face any challenge as long as they could do it together. That was the promise they made to each other, and they fulfilled it with every step. The memories took her to the most difficult moments, when Lucia was born, and then Charles. Olivia recalled the anxiety and fear she felt during those years when everything seemed uncertain and problems piled up in their lives. However, whenever she felt that the burden was too heavy, all it took was for Michael to hold her in his arms, for the whole world to feel a little less overwhelming. It was during those days that she truly understood the strength of their love and the unbreakable commitment that bound them together. The life they shared was simple, marked by the routine of work and the care of their children. Yet for them, those everyday moments were filled with meaning. The memories of afternoons under the sun, shared laughter, and nights spent sitting in the garden discussing the future became little treasures that she cherished with every fiber of her being. And then came the last memory, the most bitter, the day Michael departed. After a long illness, Michael said goodbye to her with the same calm with which he had faced life. That farewell left a deep void in Olivia, a space she never thought could be filled again. And while her children and granddaughter brought her renewed purpose, she always felt that a part of her had gone with him, a gap that, until now, had remained intact. Now, with this unexpected and surreal news of her pregnancy, Olivia felt that Michael was once again present in her life in a way she didn't fully understand. It was as if, through this impossible situation, he was giving her one last chance to live what they both had dreamed of, a complete life filled with love, even if it was in her later years. Something in her heart told her that this baby, despite everything, was a kind of gift, a miracle that life was offering her to honor what they had shared. However, reality also loomed large, with all its challenges and risks. Olivia knew that this decision, whatever it was, would change her life and that of her children forever. But amid all the doubts and fears, that night she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. A quiet hope that spoke to her of the possibility of closure, of a final act that could bring peace to her soul. At dawn, as the first rays of sunlight began to fill the room, Olivia, tired but serene, whispered silently, as if Michael could hear her. "I don't know what path I should take, but I feel you here, helping me decide." With a strange sense of peace, Olivia closed her eyes, knowing that the days ahead would test her strength and conviction. The news continued to resonate in Olivia's mind. After sleepless nights, during which the mix of emotions overwhelmed her, she decided it was time to talk to her children. She knew she couldn't keep this a secret. It was too important, too profound. Although she feared their reaction, she needed to share it with them and, in some way, find an answer through their words and looks. One afternoon, she called Lucia and Charles and asked them to come over. She also requested Anna to be present, as she felt this conversation would not only mark a turning point in her life, but in the lives of the entire family. Lucia was the first to arrive. The worry she felt for her mother's health was evident on her face. Ever since Olivia mentioned her fatigue and dizziness, Lucia had been restless, urging her to rest and take things easy. Soon after, Charles arrived, accompanied by the calm and peace that always characterized him. He usually trusted in his mother's strength and in fate, though that day he noticed something different in Olivia's demeanor. Finally, Anna sat beside her grandmother, taking her hand and looking at her with that deep curiosity that seemed to say she could tell her anything. Once they were all gathered in the living room, Olivia began to speak, choosing her words carefully. First, she talked about the fatigue and dizziness, about how those symptoms had led her to the doctor. Lucia watched her with a furrowed brow, while Charles nodded silently. But when Olivia uttered the word pregnancy, everything changed. Lucia's eyes widened in shock, her lips parted in pure confusion, while Charles fell into absolute silence beside her. There was a moment of silence, as if each one was trying to process the impossible. Lucia was the first to react, her voice laden with disbelief and fear. "Mom, how is this possible? At your age, it's too dangerous," she murmured, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "You can't go through with this. You need to think about your health. Don't you realize what you're risking?" Lucia's words, filled with a nearly desperate concern, struck a chord in Olivia's heart, who, although she understood her daughter's reaction, felt that those words only added weight to the burden she already carried. However, before she could respond, Charles intervened. "Mom," he said calmly, placing a hand over hers, "I believe this is a sign, a miracle like no other. Life has given you something no one could have imagined. And if this baby is here, it's because it's meant to be. I don't think you should reject it." Lucia turned to her brother, looking at him with a mixture of astonishment and frustration. "Charles, are you hearing yourself? This is irresponsible. We could lose her. Do you realize that?" Lucia's voice broke at the end, tears filling her eyes. "She's our mother, and she has already lived her life. She already has us, and Anna. There's no reason to take such a risk." Charles looked at her, his expression firm and serene. "And what if this baby is a blessing? What if God has placed it in her life for a reason we don't understand? We've always learned to accept what life gives us, Lucia. This is something that goes beyond us." The room filled with tension. Olivia watched as her children, who had always been close and united, began to fracture over something they barely understood. She felt the weight of their gazes, each one waiting for her to take sides. But Olivia knew she wasn't ready to choose a path, and seeing them at odds made the decision weigh even more heavily on her heart. Anna, who had remained silent until then, looked at her uncle and aunt, bewildered. She knew her grandmother was strong and had always trusted her, but the fear on her mother's and uncle's faces filled her with uncertainty. For the first time in her life, the possibility of losing her grandmother struck her like lightning, and a knot of anguish formed in her chest. Olivia noticed the change in Anna, and gently squeezing her hand, gave her a reassuring look. Then she took a breath and looked at her children. "I know this is difficult to understand," she began, her voice soft but firm. "I can't fully comprehend it myself, but I want you to know that, regardless of what I decide, I need to feel your support, because I can't make this decision without you." Charles nodded, still convinced that moving forward was the right path. Lucia, on the other hand, looked at her mother with a mix of love and desperation. Her eyes reflected a silent plea, a request for her mother to choose safety, not to risk losing her. But Olivia only asked for time to understand herself, to listen to her heart. Lucia and Charles, although distant in their positions, accepted with reservations. And that night, as they said goodbye, they all left the house with a heavy uncertainty in their hearts. As she closed the door behind them, Olivia knew that, although she loved them deeply, her decision would not depend on Lucia or Charles. It would be a choice she would have to make alone, but she felt she needed that time, that silence in which she could speak with her own soul. The days following the meeting at Olivia's house brought a tense and strange atmosphere to the family. The words exchanged between Lucia and Charles that afternoon had become a point of friction that neither of them was willing to let go. Both immersed themselves in their thoughts, ruminating over what had been said and what each perceived as insensitivity on the other's part. For Lucia, the situation had become a constant source of worry. Every day her mother continued to show signs of fragility, and although they had yet to discuss the final decision, the mere fact that Olivia was considering continuing with the pregnancy seemed to her a risk too great to take. Each phone call, each little visit to her mother, was filled with a silent tension, where Lucia tried, with subtle words, to show Olivia the danger she was in. "Mum, think of Anna. Think of us. You've already given all you had to give. That's enough," she would say softly, her eyes filled with a mix of anguish and love. Charles, for his part, felt increasingly hurt by his sister's stance. His faith and certainty that the pregnancy was a miracle were unshakable, and he couldn't understand how Lucia couldn't see it the same way. In his mind, this unexpected life was a sign of something greater, a gift that his mother should accept without hesitation. He began attending special services at church, lighting candles and praying fervently, convinced that God's will was guiding this path and that somehow everything would turn out fine. The tension became evident the following Sunday during a family gathering that Olivia had organized. It was a sunny day, and the three of them gathered on the terrace for lunch. However, the atmosphere soon turned uncomfortable. Lucia, in an attempt to help Charles understand her perspective, tried to address him privately, while Olivia and Anna chatted nearby. "Charles, I don't understand how you can be so idealistic," Lucia began, searching for the right words so as not to sound hurtful. "Our mother isn't a young woman. Her body can't handle the same challenges anymore. Don't you see that this could destroy her?" Charles, who initially tried to remain calm, couldn't help the frustration that began to seep into his voice. "And don't you see that maybe this is what Mom needs? That this could give her purpose, a last chance to close her life in peace? Not everything is as calculated and logical as you want to see it, Lucia. Why are you so afraid to trust in something greater than us?" Charles's words fell like stones on Lucia's heart. She felt he wasn't seeing reality, that he was trapped in a dangerous fantasy, blinded by his beliefs. For her, her mother's life was all that mattered, and she was increasingly struggling to understand why her brother couldn't see it the same way. She took a deep breath and looked at him with a mix of frustration and pity. "Charles, it's not a matter of faith," she replied firmly. "It's a matter of common sense. I love Mom too, but I don't want her to suffer unnecessarily. Can you imagine what might happen if we lose her? Are you willing to live with that, to risk her life just for a belief?" Charles, hurt by his sister's words, couldn't hide the reproach in his gaze. "And are you willing to deny her something that could bring her happiness? This baby isn't a coincidence, Lucia, and I trust that God will protect her. I don't understand how you can be so cold about it." Lucia felt her emotions spilling over and had to look away so he wouldn't see the tears threatening to escape. The discussion seemed to have no resolution, and the chasm between them widened with each word. For the first time in her life, she felt alone in front of her brother, as if the bond that had always united them was now covered by an invisible barrier that neither knew how to break. In the distance, Olivia watched her children with a heavy heart. She couldn't hear the exact words, but the tension between them was evident. Although Anna tried to distract her by talking about her studies and friends, Olivia could barely concentrate on what her granddaughter was saying. She knew her children were divided, and somehow she felt that her situation had begun to damage something she had always treasured: the family unity. By the end of the afternoon, Lucia and Charles quickly said their goodbyes, each lost in their own thoughts. The distance between them was evident in their gestures, in the way they barely looked at each other. Olivia, closing the door behind them, felt a knot in her stomach. She was aware that the decision she had to make would not only affect her life, but also the relationship between her children. Guilt began to settle in her, and she wondered if, somehow, it was unfair to put them through this conflict. That night, as she cleared the dinner dishes, Olivia realized she couldn't avoid the pain this decision was causing. She knew that both Lucia and Charles loved her deeply, and that each, in their own way, was trying to protect her. But she also understood that their opposing positions could tear apart the bonds that held them together, and that was something that pained her more than she had ever imagined. Standing in the dim light of her kitchen, Olivia closed her eyes, invoking the strength she had accumulated throughout her life. Aware that the road ahead would be complicated and filled with difficult decisions, she knew she would have to find a way to keep her family united, regardless of the final decision she made. With that thought in mind, she retired to her room, feeling more alone and divided than ever, but with the determination to protect her children and her family above all else. The family tension and the doubts that tormented her began to weigh heavily on Olivia's heart. She felt the burden of the decision growing larger, like a river threatening to overflow. Amid the conflicts between her children and the fear that kept her awake every night, she understood that she needed to talk to someone outside the family, someone who could listen to her without getting emotionally involved. And who better than her lifelong friends? That afternoon, Olivia decided to go to the village cafe, a cozy place she had frequented with Elizabeth and May for decades. They had been her confidants through all stages of life, in moments of joy and in her deepest sorrows, sharing laughter and tears as only true friends can do. When she arrived, Elizabeth and May were already waiting for her at their usual table by the window. Elizabeth, a woman with a youthful and vibrant spirit, got up to greet her with a warm hug. At 70, she still maintained a vitality that was contagious. Her eyes sparkled with an energy that contrasted with May's calm demeanor, who was the most pragmatic of the three. May, with her serious and serene expression, welcomed her with an attentive and understanding look, ready to listen to everything her friend needed to express. Once they sat down and the aroma of coffee filled the air, Olivia recounted everything that had happened, explaining every detail, from the news at the doctor's office to the reactions of Lucia and Charles. When she finished, her friends looked at her in silence, processing the magnitude of what they had just heard. Finally, it was Elizabeth who broke the silence. "Darling, this is incredible," she said with a gentle smile and eyes full of understanding. "I know it sounds strange, but maybe this is an opportunity life is giving you to do something unique, something that connects you with what you have always dreamed of. Having a baby at this age. I know it's difficult, but I also know you're strong. I had Andres at 45, and it was an incredible experience, full of challenges, but also of much love and meaning. It was my second chance to experience motherhood with a different perspective." Elizabeth looked at Olivia with tenderness, recalling her own years of advanced motherhood when she had felt life giving her renewed purpose. For her, this pregnancy could be for Olivia a new source of vitality, a possibility to reconnect with life and leave a mark that reflected the love that had always characterized her. May, who had listened attentively to Elizabeth, paused before speaking. "Olivia," she began in her characteristically calm tone, "I understand Elizabeth's excitement, but I also think you need to consider the sacrifice this entails. Motherhood is not simple, and at our age, every step is a greater burden. Personally, I feel at peace with what I've lived. I went through a painful time when I lost Javier, but now I enjoy the tranquility, the time I can dedicate to myself and to my adult children. Are you sure you want to give up that peace?" May's words sank like an anchor in Olivia's thoughts. They were questions she hadn't wanted to face honestly until now. Was she ready to confront motherhood again, with all that it entailed in terms of physical and emotional sacrifice? Or was it merely a romantic desire that kept alive the memory of her love for Michael? Olivia nodded silently, reflecting on what both of them had said. Elizabeth offered her a hopeful vision, a kind of rebirth that felt as desired as it was risky. May, on the other hand, reminded her of the sacrifices, the renunciations, and the effort that moving forward would entail. Both perspectives left her in a sea of conflicting thoughts. For a while, the three women fell into a contemplative silence, each reflecting on their own lives, their choices, and the paths they had taken. Finally, Olivia looked at her friends with a grateful expression. "Thank you, truly. You don't know how much it helps me to hear you," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's as if in your words, I find a piece of what I'm missing. Sometimes I feel this is a sign from Michael, something he would have wanted for me. But other times, like you say, May, I think about the tranquility, the moments of peace that remain, and that I have cherished so much." May took her hand and nodded in understanding. "Peace is valuable, Olivia, but only you can decide if you're willing to trade it. There are no easy decisions in this, and both options will demand something significant from you. What's important is that whatever you choose, you do it because it fulfills you, not because you want to meet others' expectations." Elizabeth also looked at her with affection. "Whatever your decision, we'll be here, supporting you as always. You've been an incredibly strong woman your whole life, Olivia. And no matter which path you choose, I'm sure you'll find the love and peace you need." With a mix of emotions, Olivia felt the weight of the decision become a little lighter, at least for that moment. As they finished their coffee and chatted about memories and anecdotes from the old days, Olivia felt a fleeting peace that she desperately needed. She knew the final decision still awaited her, but the perspective of her friends allowed her to see herself from different angles, and for the first time, it gave her a sense of clarity. That night, returning home, Olivia felt more at peace than in previous days. She walked slowly down the hallway, touching the photos of Michael, her children when they were small, and Anna. When she reached her bedroom, she lay down on the bed, closing her eyes, still feeling the resonance of her friend's words in her mind. She knew there was still a long road ahead, and that the decision she made would forever change the rest of her life. But at that moment, in the calm of her room, and with the unconditional support of her friends resonating in her heart, Olivia began to hear, perhaps for the first time, her own inner voice. The echo of her own desires and fears, that voice that whispered a truth only she could uncover. The news of her grandmother's pregnancy had plunged Anna into a mix of emotions that were difficult to comprehend. At 15, she had learned to trust Olivia more than anyone else, and always saw her as a figure of unbreakable strength, someone who seemed to have answers for everything. But now, with the arguments between her parents and the uncertainty at home, Anna felt trapped in a whirlwind of questions that no one had fully answered. One day, as the sun began to set, casting a soft golden hue over the garden, Olivia asked Anna to help her gather some flowers. Olivia loved her garden. Every plant and flower was for her a small symbol of life, something she nurtured that brought her peace in moments of confusion. For Anna, those afternoons in the garden had always been special, and this particular one seemed to hold deeper significance. Without saying much, they picked the flowers in silence, feeling the air charged with unspoken words. Finally, Olivia stopped and sat on the wooden bench, looking at her granddaughter. With a slight smile, she gestured for Anna to sit next to her, and Anna, without hesitation, settled close, enveloped by her grandmother's warm presence. "I know all of this has confused you, my dear," Olivia said softly and slowly. Anna nodded, looking down, unsure of where to begin. "I don't understand, Grandma. Everyone is different. Mom and Uncle Charles are always arguing, and you seem so calm but also sad," Anna murmured, barely lifting her gaze. Olivia sighed and took Anna's hands in hers. Her hands, marked by time and labor, contrasted with Anna's young and smooth ones. "Life, my love, presents us with decisions that are sometimes so difficult that we don't know which path is right. I feel torn myself, because what I choose affects not just me, but also those I love, like you, your mom, and your uncle." Anna looked at her grandmother with a doubtful expression. "But why risk something that could hurt you? Wouldn't it be better for you to just stay calm, like before?" Olivia studied her granddaughter, reading the mix of concern and curiosity in her face. She was so young, and while she was starting to grasp the complexity of life, she still had a long way to go before understanding the value of certain decisions. When you love someone, Anna, you're willing to make sacrifices. No matter how hard it is, that love gives you a strength you couldn't imagine, Olivia explained gently. "Your grandfather, Michael, and I faced many difficult moments, but we always moved forward because we had each other. And this baby, although I don't know if I will continue with the pregnancy, I feel it could be my last chance to close a cycle of love, to honor the life I shared with him." Anna listened attentively, trying to understand her grandmother's emotions while also grappling with her own fear of losing her. Despite the tranquility Olivia projected, Anna could see the fragility in her eyes, and that caused a pang in her heart. "Aren't you afraid, Grandma?" she asked, her sincerity almost surprising herself. Olivia smiled serenely and nodded. "Of course I'm afraid, my dear. There are things in life that fill us with fear, and this is one of them. But I also know that fear is just part of the decision. Sometimes, the most important thing is to listen to what your heart truly wants, without letting fear stop you from moving forward." Anna squeezed her grandmother's hand and fell silent, absorbing every word. She felt that this conversation was filled with a wisdom she didn't fully understand yet, but that somehow left a deep imprint on her. Seeing her so focused, Olivia lovingly stroked her hair. In life, you will always encounter situations where you must make difficult decisions, and you won't always know if you made the right one. But if you decide from love, from a sincere desire to do what's best, no matter what the outcome is, you will live in peace with yourself. And that, dear Anna, is the most important thing. Anna, who had always considered her grandmother a strong and wise woman, began to see something more in her, a kind of everyday hero, someone who, even with doubts and fears, moved forward with a dignity that made her unique. She promised herself she would remember these words, knowing they would someday help her face her own dilemmas. As night began to fall, the air filled with the fragrance of the flowers they had gathered. Olivia and Anna remained in the garden, in silence, sharing a moment of peace amid the tensions each carried. Olivia knew she didn't have all the answers, but at that moment she understood she had done the right thing by sharing her thoughts with Anna, planting a seed of wisdom in her that might one day blossom in her own life. That night, Anna returned home with a lighter heart and a renewed admiration for her grandmother. She felt she had received a valuable legacy, a piece of advice that could always accompany her. Olivia, on the other hand, went back to her room feeling she had given Anna a small part of her own strength, a memory that might help her face the difficult moments she herself had once experienced. Both, without saying it, knew that day in the garden had been special, a moment when youth and experience met to build a bond stronger than any uncertainty. Olivia's life continued to be filled with doubts, but that afternoon in the garden, amid whispers of love and lessons, they both found refuge in the truth they shared. As the days went by, and although Olivia tried to remain calm, the tension of the past weeks deeply unsettled her. At night, in her dimly lit room, she immersed herself in thoughts and the anxiety of a decision that was becoming increasingly pressing. The conversation with her children, the advice of her friends, and Anna's words swirled in her mind, but she still felt something was missing, an answer that could only be found within herself. One morning, while preparing breakfast, Olivia recalled the peace she always felt in church. She wasn't a devout woman in the strictest sense, but the church had been a place of comfort during difficult times, especially since Michael's death. There she found a silent tranquility, a sense of closeness to something greater. So after finishing breakfast, she put on her coat and stepped outside, walking with firm steps toward the village church. Upon arriving, the atmosphere was solemn and calm. The sound of her footsteps resonated softly on the marble floor, and the dim light streaming through the stained glass created a play of colors that filled the space with serenity. At the back of the church, Father George, a gray-haired priest with a kind gaze, was arranging some candles in front of the altar. He was a man who had witnessed generations pass through the village and had officiated Olivia and Michael's wedding so many years ago. Seeing her, Father George smiled and gestured a warm welcome. Olivia approached slowly, feeling her heart swell with a deep respect for the place and the man before her. The priest invited her to sit on one of the benches, and they settled into the quiet corner of the church. "Olivia, it's a pleasure to see you," he said softly, noticing a mixture of unease and fatigue in her eyes. "What brings you here?" She took a moment before answering, her words heavy with a weight she hadn't fully shared with anyone. "Father, I'm facing a situation that I never imagined. I don't know if you know all the details, but a few weeks ago, I discovered that I am pregnant." Father George, though surprised, remained calm and listened attentively as Olivia explained her situation. Her age, the risks to her health, the family tensions, and above all, the uncertainty of whether or not to continue with the pregnancy. It was the first time she had expressed her confusion and fears so openly, and she felt strangely relieved to do so. When she finished speaking, the priest offered her a look full of understanding. "Olivia, your situation is truly extraordinary," he began, maintaining a soft and serene tone. Life sometimes presents us with challenges that seem impossible to understand, and you find yourself at a moment where any decision carries immense weight. However, I believe that the true answer lies within you, in that deep place that only you know. She nodded, her eyes fixed on the altar, absorbing every word. In times like this, Father George continued, the most important thing is for you to find peace with the decision you make. You don't have to please your children or anyone else. You must do what allows you to live in peace. This decision should come from what you feel in your heart, and even though it may seem difficult, you must give yourself the freedom to listen to that inner voice. Olivia closed her eyes for a moment, feeling those words resonate within her. She had spent so long worrying about Lucia and Charles's opinions, about not failing those who loved her, that she had forgotten that, in the end, the choice was solely hers. Father George offered her a perspective that restored her power over her own life and that infused her with unexpected strength. Father, I feel as if Michael is with me, as if he is speaking to me, Olivia confessed, allowing a solitary tear to roll down her cheek. I don't know if it's just a memory or if it's truly his spirit. But sometimes I feel that this baby is a final opportunity to honor the love we shared. The priest smiled with serene compassion. Love, Olivia, is a force that transcends time and distance. Sometimes, the feelings we think of as memories are something deeper, a connection that remains alive within us. Perhaps in this baby, you see the chance to close a cycle, to live something you've carried in your heart for a long time, but the decision is still yours, and what matters is that you make it from the love and peace you've cultivated throughout your life. With those words, Olivia felt a weight begin to lift from her shoulders. She felt free, not from responsibility, but from the expectations of others that had suffocated her. The choice was still difficult, but now she knew she had to confront it from her own desires and beliefs, not from fear or others' opinions. After a while in silence, Olivia thanked Father George and lit a candle, closing her eyes and allowing a deep calm to wash over her. In that moment, as the warmth of the flame illuminated the sacred space, she felt as though she had found refuge within herself, an inner strength that, somehow, showed her the way. As she left the church, the cool breeze welcomed her, and she felt as though she was breathing differently, lighter and more serene. She knew there was still a long road ahead and a decision to make, but she was no longer trapped in doubt or pressure from others. Inside her, Olivia had begun to discover the answer she had been seeking, and although she hadn't fully found it, she knew she was on the right path. Walking back home, she felt that the love she shared with Michael, the affection of her children, and Anna's innocent devotion were her greatest legacy, and that in some way, whatever the decision, they would continue to support her. The peace she had found in church remained within her like a light, guiding her toward a choice that was ever closer to the truth she alone could hear. After her conversation in church and the days of introspection that followed, Olivia felt clarity settling in her mind and heart. It was no longer confusion or fear that guided her. Instead, a profound peace helped her accept the decision that, while challenging, felt like her own. She understood that the risk was real and that uncertainty lurked at every step, but she also knew that if she decided to continue with the pregnancy, she would do so from the love and serenity she had cultivated throughout her life. One morning, with the sun barely illuminating the walls of her living room, Olivia decided it was time to speak with her children and granddaughter. Through a simple message, she asked Lucia, Charles, and Anna to come to her house that afternoon. The wait felt long, filled with silent thoughts as she rehearsed the words she would say. She knew that as much as she had found her peace, her children deserved an explanation, a reason they could understand and accept, even if they didn't agree. When they all arrived, she greeted them with a soft smile, though her eyes reflected the gravity of the moment. She asked them to take a seat in the living room, and with a deep breath, Olivia sat down in front of them. Charles looked at her with a mix of hope and anticipation, while Lucia, though trying to remain composed, couldn't hide the worry on her face. Anna, silently, stayed close to her grandmother, holding her hand affectionately, as if sensing that what Olivia was about to say would mark a profound change in all their lives. "I know this news has been difficult for you," Olivia began, her voice gentle but firm. "These last few days have been a time of reflection for me, a time to listen to my heart and find a peace I thought I had lost. I have heard your advice, your fears, and your hopes, and I value them deeply. But this is a decision I can only make from my own being." Charles tilted his head, holding his breath, while Lucia furrowed her brow slightly, anticipating what their mother would say. Olivia paused, as if each word needed space to flow clearly. "I am going to proceed with the pregnancy," she announced calmly. "I know there are risks, and I understand this may be difficult for you, but I feel this baby is a final gift, an opportunity to close a cycle that began with your father, with the love we shared. I don't know how much time I will have, but I feel I need to do this to be at peace with myself and the life I've lived." Her words filled the air like an echo, and for a moment, no one knew how to react. Lucia, tears in her eyes, broke the silence, her voice filled with anguish. "Mom, I beg you, think about what this means. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to put you at risk for something that maybe isn't necessary," she said, trying to control her trembling voice. "I understand you feel a connection to the baby. But is it worth it if you endanger your life? You already have a family. You already have love. You have us." Charles, who had remained silent until then, took his mother's hand and gave her a look of deep admiration and gratitude. "Mom, I support you. If this is what brings you peace, if this is what you feel in your heart, then I'm with you. I feel that God has placed this miracle in your life for a reason, and I have no doubt that He will care for you every step of the way." Lucia looked at him with a mix of pain and confusion, quickly turning her gaze away. To her, Charles's position was not just incomprehensible, it was painful. She felt that, in some way, he wasn't valuing the gravity of the risk, as if he didn't understand that this decision could forever change the life of the entire family. Anna, until then quiet, squeezed her grandmother's hand and spoke with a sweetness that broke the tense atmosphere. "Grandma, I love you, and even though I'm scared, I know you know what's best for you. I'll be here for you and for the baby, no matter what happens." Anna's words resonated deeply with Olivia, filling her with tenderness and infinite gratitude for her granddaughter, who had always been her accomplice and, in some way, understood her with unexpected maturity. Olivia leaned toward Lucia, who looked at her with tears in her eyes, filled with immense love, but also with pain. "Lucia, my daughter, I know this is hard for you. I know your greatest wish is for me to be okay and to stay here with you, and I promise I will fight to take care of myself and do everything in my power. But I also want you to understand that this is something I need to do. I want you to realize that while my love for you, Charles, and Anna is immense, I also need to follow what I feel inside," she said, placing a hand on her chest, where a deep conviction beat. Lucia nodded, though the pain in her eyes reflected the internal struggle that consumed her. It was a mix of love, worry, and the understanding that even if she didn't share her mother's decision, she couldn't stop her. In that moment, a kind of resignation settled in her chest, and while her mind still resisted, her heart began to accept that she had to support her mother on the path she had chosen. The conversation ended with a long, emotional hug. Olivia felt how each of her children, along with Anna, embraced her with the love and fear they held in their hearts. For Lucia and Charles, that hug was a kind of truce, a moment of unity in the midst of a situation that overwhelmed them and filled them with uncertainty. Anna, with silent tears, felt that her grandmother was entrusting her with a secret, a promise of life that they both shared. That night, when Olivia was alone, she felt an inexplicable calm wash over her. She knew that the decision she had made could bring difficulties, but she also felt that she was finally at peace. In her heart, she was sure that Michael would be with her every step of the way, and that whatever happened, she had chosen from love and authenticity. As she closed her eyes, Olivia thought about her family, about Lucia, Charles, Anna, and the baby growing inside her. In that moment, she allowed herself to dream of the future, of welcoming this new life and leaving a legacy of love and strength in the hearts of all those she cherished. The weeks following Olivia's decision brought a mix of hope, restlessness, and moments of unexpected strength. As the pregnancy progressed, Olivia began to feel the physical and emotional weight of the choice she had made. Her body, already marked by years and hard work, started to show signs of wear. At times, fatigue would overwhelm her to the point that even simple tasks, like climbing stairs or walking in the garden, required more effort than she had ever imagined. The news of Olivia's pregnancy spread slowly through the village. Neighbors and friends initially reacted with surprise and confusion, some expressing concern, while others viewed the pregnancy as a unique miracle. Nevertheless, everyone, in one way or another, showed their support. Even Dr. Brown, who was carefully monitoring her, did her best to ensure Olivia received the best care, while never ceasing to warn her about the risks inherent at her age. Lucia and Charles, still carrying differing opinions, were forced to set aside their differences to support their mother. Each in their own way did what they could to help cope with the situation. Lucia was protective and attentive, making sure Olivia adhered strictly to the doctor's guidelines, reminding her at every visit of the importance of eating well and resting enough. Though she still feared the consequences deep down, Lucia made an effort to conceal her anxiety, convincing herself that what mattered most was to support her mother and give her the peace she so needed. Charles, on the other hand, sought refuge in faith, convinced that divine will would protect both Olivia and the baby. He began visiting her more frequently, sharing moments of prayer and reflection that became a balm for both in the face of uncertainty. Even though he knew Lucia still doubted their mother's safety, Charles maintained a calm that allowed him to instill the optimism Olivia needed. His serenity somewhat eased the anxiety Lucia felt, and while they both avoided directly discussing their differences, they supported one another in every moment. Anna, always eager to accompany her grandmother, became her most loyal companion. Every morning, she helped Olivia get up, prepared her tea, and joined her on short walks in the garden, uplifting her with youthful laughter and an optimistic attitude. For Anna, those shared moments with Olivia became a treasure, a kind of ritual where they both found strength. The grandmother taught her small details about the plants and flowers, and Anna, with genuine admiration, absorbed every word as if she were receiving an inheritance of wisdom and love. One afternoon, while Anna helped Olivia water the plants, the teenager couldn't help but ask a question she had kept in her heart. "Grandma, are you afraid?" The question was simple, yet it was laden with a mixture of innocence and concern that reflected the bond they shared. Olivia paused for a moment, watching how the droplets of water fell on the leaves of the plants. "Yes, Anna, of course I'm afraid," she replied honestly, placing a hand on her granddaughter's shoulder. "But I also feel that I've made the right decision. When you do something from love, fear loses some of its power." Anna nodded, understanding her grandmother's message and feeling reassured. In every glance, in every shared smile, she found a courage that deeply inspired her, and she promised herself she would do everything possible to support her and bring her joy every day along this path. As the days went by, Olivia began to notice the signs of wear in her body more frequently. Days of full energy became scarce, and there were times when the simple act of walking left her exhausted. Lucia noticed every change in her mother, and though it pained her to see how the pregnancy affected Olivia's health, she made an effort to contain her fears, staying close to her mother to help with anything she needed. Every time her mother showed the slightest sign of fatigue, Lucia would take her hand, prepare an infusion, and encourage her to rest. For Lucia, these acts of care were a way to express her love and protect Olivia from any risk. On one particular afternoon, when Olivia felt weaker than usual, Charles arrived with a bouquet of fresh flowers, something his mother loved deeply. He handed them to her with a smile, reminding her that God was present in every little detail of life, even in those moments when everything seemed cloudy. Olivia, touched by the simplicity of the gesture, looked at him with gratitude, feeling that amidst their differences, her family provided her with a strength she had never imagined. That night, as Olivia rested, Lucia and Charles remained in the living room in a silence that spoke volumes. Neither of them knew how to express what they felt. Lucia's constant fear, Charles's unwavering faith. But as they watched their mother, they both understood that the decision was made, and all they could do was offer her their unconditional support. Anna soon joined them and, without saying a word, sat next to them. In that instant, the love they felt for Olivia united them in an invisible bond, a pact of support and care that transcended any differences. They knew the days would be tough, that the path was filled with uncertainty, but they also knew that, no matter what happened, they would be together. In the weeks that followed, the family remained united in caring for Olivia, facing each day with the certainty that love could transform fear into strength. For Olivia, the unwavering support of her children and granddaughter was all she needed to move forward, to face the challenges that the pregnancy brought, and to remember, in every moment, that she was not alone. As the pregnancy progressed and complications arose, Olivia moved forward with the peace of knowing that her family was by her side. That unity, that silent promise of love, became the strength that kept her standing, and every gesture from her children and Anna was a reminder that, no matter the challenges, they had found a reason to remain united in love. In the days leading up to the birth, the atmosphere in Olivia's home was a whirlwind of emotions and fears. With each new dawn, her health grew more delicate, and signs of exhaustion became visible on her face. The light in her eyes remained, as if each day was accompanied by an inner strength that no one else could fully comprehend, but the physical toll was overwhelming. Olivia, aware of the difficulties and risks, still maintained her serenity, as if the peace she found in making her decision gave her the courage to face every challenge. The day of the delivery arrived early, when the sky barely lightened to a rosy hue. Charles, Lucia, and Anna helped her prepare, their movements clumsy and nervous, as if the mere act of getting Olivia to her feet was a threat to her fragile body. Olivia reassured them with a serene smile, placing a hand on each of theirs, and with gentle words reminded them that, no matter what happened, they were united, and her love for them would always be present. Once at the hospital, Olivia was taken to the delivery room. Her face, though marked by fatigue, remained calm. Charles took her hand before she was taken away, leaning in to whisper a prayer for strength. Lucia, on the other hand, could barely maintain her composure. Her lips were pressed tightly together, and her eyes avoided looking at her mother for too long, as if confronting her fragility would mean accepting that this could be their last goodbye. "Anna," Olivia said, looking at her granddaughter with a sweetness that only a grandmother could express. "I want you to be strong, okay? Always be brave, and remember that I love you." Anna, with tears filling her eyes, could hardly nod. The grandmother, who had always been her rock of stability, now lay in a hospital bed, fragile and small, and Anna felt the ground beneath her tremble. "I love you, Grandma. I love you so much," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper, fearing her words might get lost in the air. Olivia gave her one last smile before being taken to the delivery room, and Anna felt as if a part of her stayed in that gaze, suspended between love and fear. In the waiting room, time seemed to stretch mercilessly. Lucia paced back and forth, biting her nails and holding back the tears that threatened to spill at any moment. Charles watched her, his expression grave and worried, and though his faith gave him strength, The weight of uncertainty felt more real and heavier than ever. Occasionally he closed his eyes, recalling his prayers and asking God to protect his mother. "Charles, what if something happens? What if we don't see her again?" Lucia whispered, stopping and looking at her brother with a heart-wrenching expression. Charles looked at her with compassion, searching for the right words. "She is strong, Lucia. Mom has made this decision from love and peace, and that gives her a strength we cannot see. We just have to trust that she will be okay. And if not, we have to trust that she is at peace with what she chose." Lucia nodded, but the turmoil on her face reflected the internal conflict that tormented her. She wanted to trust. She wanted to be strong like her mother, but fear consumed her from within. Every passing minute without news was torture. She took Charles's hand, and he held it tightly, allowing her to lean on him while they waited, both trying to find comfort in each other's presence. Meanwhile, Anna had sat down next to them, hugging her knees and staring at the floor. The waiting room was filled with murmurs and distant footsteps, but for her, everything was background noise, distant and blurry. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind, and the fear of never hearing her voice again pierced her heart like a thorn. She wanted to be strong, but tears blurred her vision, and every time she tried to think of something else, she could only imagine the possibility of losing her. After hours of waiting, a doctor appeared at the door of the room, his serious face wearing an expression that was almost impossible to decipher. The three of them stood up immediately, feeling as if the air had stopped in their lungs. Lucia stepped forward, unable to hide the tremor in her hands. "My mother? How is my mother?" she asked, her voice breaking. The doctor looked at all three of them with a mix of compassion and professionalism, lowering his gaze slightly. "The baby has been born. She is a strong and healthy girl." The news of the arrival of little Olivia was a fleeting moment of relief, like a ray of light amid uncertainty. Anna managed to smile through her tears, and Charles closed his eyes, silently giving thanks. But the doctor paused and continued, his tone growing graver. "However, your mother has had many complications. Her body was too weak to withstand the strain of labor." The doctor hesitated for a moment before delivering the words they feared to hear. "I'm deeply sorry. Your mother did not survive. She passed away shortly after the birth of the baby." Silence filled the room, and in an instant, Lucia, Charles, and Anna's world seemed to shatter into 1,000 pieces. Lucia felt her legs give way, and her brother caught her just before she collapsed into tears. Charles, with his eyes closed, murmured a prayer softly as sorrow filled his chest with an immeasurable sadness. Anna stood frozen, her body trembling and her mind trapped in disbelief, as if her thoughts could not accept what they had just heard. Lucia's tears finally overflowed, and the cry she had repressed for so long erupted with an intensity that shattered the silence of the room. Charles held her, cradling her, as he too tried to hold back his own tears, whispering words of comfort that he didn't even know if he believed. Anna, with tears silently rolling down her cheeks, moved closer to her uncle and mother, seeking refuge in their shared embrace as the pain engulfed them. After a few minutes of silent mourning, the doctor asked if they wanted to meet the baby. All three nodded, and with broken hearts, they followed him to the room where the little girl lay sleeping, oblivious to everything, wrapped in a white blanket that barely revealed her tiny face. Lucia gazed at her with a mix of pain and tenderness, and as she looked at her daughter's face, she felt a small spark of hope ignite amidst the sorrow. Carefully, she caressed the baby's cheek, feeling in her the presence of her mother, as if a part of Olivia now lived in that little creature. "Her name will be Olivia," Lucia whispered, her voice choked. She looked at Charles, who nodded, his expression reflecting the understanding and sorrow they shared at that moment. Anna, with her eyes still filled with tears, leaned in and touched her new sister's tiny hand, feeling that although her grandmother was no longer physically present, Her love and strength would live on in that girl. They all stood in silence, contemplating little Olivia, and recognizing that although the pain of loss was overwhelming, in the baby was a legacy, a promise of love that would endure through generations. They knew that despite their grandmother's absence, each of them would carry her memory in their hearts, and that together they would care for the child Olivia had left as her final gift of love. As they exited the room, the emptiness in their hearts remained, but there was a silent peace that upheld them, as if Olivia's spirit were there, watching over them and reminding them that no matter the distance, the love that bound them would never fade. However, that scene faded like dust in the air, and suddenly the soft sound of birds filtering through the window awakened Olivia one early morning. She opened her eyes slowly, feeling strangely drowsy, as if she had slept for days, trapped in an alternate reality that still surrounded her like a shadow. For a few seconds, she remained still, trying to comprehend the echo of what she had just lived. Her mind struggled to rid itself of the details of the dream, as if it were trying to hold on to scenes that were quickly fading away. And then, suddenly, it hit her with all the force of memory. The impossible pregnancy, the little girl, the sacrifice she had made for her family, and the intensity of the loss she had just experienced. With her heart racing, Olivia sat up in bed and brought her hands to her face, feeling the tears begin to roll down her cheeks. The intensity of love and sorrow she had felt in the dream lingered, as real as if it had just happened. She couldn't contain her sobs, and in the solitude of her room, she hugged herself, releasing every emotion that the dream had etched into her soul. Her crying was enough to alert Lucia, who, upon hearing her mother, rushed to her room. Upon entering, she found Olivia crying with an intensity she had never seen before, and without hesitation, she approached and wrapped her in a protective embrace. "Mum, what's wrong?" "What do you have?" Lucia asked softly, trying to calm her. Olivia, still tearful, looked at her, and without saying a word, hugged her with a newfound strength, as if she never wanted to let her go. "I love you, Lucia. I love you so much. And Charles too. And Anna," she murmured between sobs, clinging to her. "I dreamed something that made me understand how much I love you and how much I need you." Lucia held her tighter, with no need for words, allowing Olivia to vent what felt like a pain mixed with gratitude. The connection between mother and daughter at that moment was deeper than either could explain. Olivia felt as if, through that dream, the love she had always felt was renewed in her heart, enveloping her in a peace that made her grateful for every second. In the days that followed, Olivia immersed herself in a newfound calm. She could not forget the dream, the lessons, the immense love she felt for that baby who had never existed yet, now lived in every part of her being. Aware that the experience had been a kind of calling, Olivia decided to gather her family to express the love she had felt in the dream, a love that now flooded her more than ever. So, one Sunday afternoon, Olivia called Charles and Anna to invite them to dinner at her house. It was not common for Olivia to organize family gatherings so frequently, but this time, hearing the warmth in her voice, they both accepted without hesitation. When the day arrived, the house filled with the chatter and laughter of family, and although no one knew exactly what had motivated the gathering, everyone felt the atmosphere of calm and love that Olivia exuded. After dinner, while they sat in the living room with a cup of tea, Olivia decided to share with them the meaning of the experience she had lived in her dreams. "I want to tell you something important," she began, her voice soft and serene. "Recently, I had a dream that reminded me of many things. Things that, at times, everyday life makes us forget." Lucia, Charles, and Anna looked at her in silence, attentive to every word. "In the dream, I was pregnant," Olivia continued, a smile gracing her lips that reflected an inexplicable love. "It was a girl, and although it was only a dream, I felt such deep love for her that it was as if I had known her, as if a part of me had lived that experience. Her eyes filled with tears as she spoke, but this time they were not tears of sadness, but of gratitude. I loved that little girl so much that I realized I have that same love here for each of you. I felt Michael by my side, as if he had brought me this dream to remind me of the value of loving intensely, of living fully in the present, and of not letting any opportunity to be together pass by. Charles took her hand with an emotional smile, feeling the impact of those words, and Lucia, with tears in her eyes, nodded, understanding her deeply. Maybe that dream was a way for me to see you all again with new eyes, to remember that even though time passes, love can always be renewed. I don't need anything more to be happy than to be here with you. And I want you to know that every day, every moment, I love you and am grateful for having you by my side, Olivia said, looking at them with an intensity that made each word an invisible bond, an eternal connection that united them beyond any circumstance. Anna, emotional and moved, got up from her seat and sat next to her grandmother, enveloping her in a deep hug. The three of them joined in that embrace, feeling that the love Olivia had just shared was like a beacon, a guide for their own lives. For them, that moment was more than a family gathering. It was a revelation, an opportunity to see life through Olivia's eyes and understand the importance of every shared moment. That night, after everyone had said their goodbyes, Olivia sat alone in her room, gazing at a photo of Michael. She knew that, in some way, he had been present in that dream, guiding her toward a new understanding of love and life. "Thank you, Michael," she whispered, placing a hand on the photo. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity to remember what is truly important." Olivia smiled, feeling enveloped in a love that transcended time and distance, and that had been renewed within her, as if every cell in her body was now infused with infinite gratitude. She knew that although that dream had been just an illusion, the feeling it had left her with was real and would live in her heart, growing with every hug, every smile, and every word she shared with her loved ones. From then on, Olivia lived each day as if it were a gift, aware that the true miracle lay in the love given and received. With each passing day, she rediscovered the value of her own story and the unconditional love she shared with her family, embracing every moment as if it were both the first and the last, knowing that in that love was the true essence of life. And so concludes this story, a reflection on love, sacrifice, and the power of living in the present. Olivia has shown us that although life puts us in unexpected situations, we can always choose to live each moment with gratitude and love. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to think of the people you love and remind them how important they are to you. Don't forget that, in the end, it's the moments of love and connection that truly matter. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more tales filled with emotions and reflections. We'll see you in the next video. And remember, it's never too late to embrace the present and value the love in our lives. Until next time.